The Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return, sponsored by Narconon Ojai.
Hello, my name is Joni Siegel, and this is the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. I'll be your host for this podcast. Today is episode number 193. When a person is addicted to drugs and or alcohol, the myriad of choices of treatment can be overwhelming. Narconon Ojai is a residential treatment facility that addresses the physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of addiction with a proven, holistic, drug-free, evidence-based step-by-step program designed to free those trapped by addiction. For more information, call 866-231-5924. Today, we have a very interesting interview with a woman named Emily O'Brien. Emily O'Brien is an entrepreneur and the founder of Comeback Snacks, a specialty popcorn company that challenges the status quo. After being sentenced to a 4-year jail term stemming from her battle with addiction, Emily set out on the mission to get clean, transform herself, and make her time in jail as meaningful as possible. Having fostered an entrepreneurial career before her sentence, Emily birthed the idea for Comeback Snacks, formerly Cons and Kernels, a popcorn brand that uses high-quality, health-conscious ingredients to create unique flavors inspired by the ones she found and curated in prison. Without further ado, let's talk to Emily O'Brien. Emily O'Brien, thank you for being on the podcast today and sharing your story.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Awesome. Your story is exciting, so I can't wait to get to the good stuff. But let's start out with, how did you get started on drugs? How did you get started on the road to addiction?
It started out of being an introvert, being very quiet as a kid. I was actually bullied a lot as an elementary school student. And so I kind of stayed home a lot. I was put in competitive sport, but even then I was still kind of bullied out competitive sport. And so I would just go to the library, right? And when I got to high school, I kind of started morphing into like someone that people would consider pretty. Because in my high school, I was like a tomboy, or in elementary school, I was like a tomboy. And so I get to high school and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how to talk to anyone. And I was really nervous. And so a lot of people in high school were, drinking Colt 45s and Fireball whiskey. And it wasn't an addiction then. It was just like, I just needed to figure out how to talk, how to be social. And so throughout high school, I used this as my way to talk to people. I don't think I really learned how to talk to people at parties sober, right? So got through high school. I graduated with honors, and went to university, where binge drinking was also part of the culture. But I always got good grades, and I didn't really see it as an issue. But it definitely started in high school, and yeah, there was waves of it, I would say, for sure.
And binge drinking, did you do that a fair amount in college?
Yeah, I would say like three days a week. Probably, because everyone would just always be going out, and you'd have like 4 or 5 classes that you'd be doing, and that you could also do a lot in your spare time. So yeah.
Right. Where was this? What part of you're from Canada, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'm like an hour outside Toronto.
Okay.
So
where did you go to college?
I went to the University of Guelph, Ontario.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was about 45 minutes away from my mom's house.
Understood. So, yeah. And I understand, why you would start off with alcohol that way. We've had other people on the podcast, and, alcohol makes it easy to talk to people. I mean, it just does. I understand that. Did you then move from alcohol into other drugs?
I experimented in high school, but I didn't depend on it in high school. As I graduated university and I moved to Toronto, the drug that was everywhere was cocaine. And I was at a point in my life where I couldn't go out and socialize unless it was with my family without having some other sort of substance, because that introvertedness had kind of carried on. And it was something that I just gotten accustomed to. Like even in my relationships, like I was like, I don't know how to go on a date sober, like, or at least I could start a date sober, but like intimacy for me was something that needed substances, right? Which actually isn't intimacy at all.
Right.
So, yeah.
Understood. So, was your family aware at all of what was going on with you?
Yeah, like I definitely ran away a lot in high school from my home because I just thought I was so independent and, really I wasn't. But the problem got really bad. Actually, when in my mid 20s, when I had moved to Toronto, and then when there was like there was like a fracture in the family, which was really difficult. I know I'm not the only one that went through this. Like so many things happen in people's families, but it was still really difficult for me. And I grew up in a very, very loving home. And so when you see things in your family kind of fall apart, it was very hard for me to deal with. And so I continued to not just drink socially, but I began to cope through that with substances as well. And in the meantime, like during all this, I was actually running a business. And so there's a whole other set of like expectations when you're a woman running a business, which is like, you don't want to seem weak. And, I would get a lot of business deals by going out, and I was one of the girls that could, and so I saw this as a necessary part of it, which it also wasn't true.
Right. What was your business, Emily? What were you doing?
My first official business was a social media company.
Okay.
So yeah, so I would work with like brands, restaurants, independent artists. I would work with events that were happening, charities, and just help them with their online content. And I would just meet people because at this point I was social, right? Like I'd gone from being not social at all to learning how to be social. So yeah, I would always be out, and that's how I would meet more people. But it came with a very, very heavy price tag.
Yep. Because the whole part of the social scene business, especially business wise, is to go out for drinks.
Yeah.
Which is fine
exactly.
if you can stop, but if you can't, then it becomes a different situation.
Yeah, and I was at the point where like there's cocaine there too, and being an entrepreneur, you can kind of sleep in if you want, right? So I was like, okay, I can just stay up till 3 or 4, and because I knew that I would get up at 11 and still work till I justified it, right? It's all about justification.
Mm-hmm.
But the kind of emotional debt that I had was not being paid off, and like I wasn't healing properly or trying to heal properly from all the things that I was kind of internalizing. Because there's a part of there's divorce and all these things, like there's like a shame associated with it if you're a certain age. Like I was told like, oh, like you shouldn't be sad about this, like aren't you old enough, and so that was another reason why I didn't talk about it, was because like I was like shamed for it. So not like from my individual family, but just from certain people. So
right,
yeah.
like why does it still bother you? I mean, you're grown up now, go your own life, it shouldn't affect you. Well,
yeah,
it just might,
Yeah. And then I was like, I shouldn't feel guilty for being sad. Right. So,
no,
but I did feel guilty. And so that's when I just hit it more. But it definitely started accumulating the toxicness, like the actual toxicness of the drug inside my body, and the toxicness of not healing was actually also doing lots of damage.
right.
So,
right.
yeah.
So how did it progress from there? You've got a business, you're drinking, you're doing cocaine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then I really wanted to stop. I really wanted to get sober, and I wanted to, like, I was just in all these like casual relationships that had no meaning. And, it was when like the Tinder, all those dating apps came out, and I was like, no one really meant anything to me. And so I finally I got to a point where I was just tired, and I met someone actually through my work who, I thought wanted me to get sober, who I thought wanted to like have my best interest in mind, because he wasn't like people that I'd met prior to that. He wasn't all about just like trying to sexualize me all the time, and that like actually made me feel like I was worth something more. So we actually developed like a pretty good friendship, and then which turned into like a romantic one, but not really a sexual one, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like so when we became closer and we actually did business together, weird things started to happen. It's like his check started bouncing and he started buying me all these presents that I didn't want. And I was just on the verge of, ending it with him.
I was
And
going to say, how does that work? His checks are bouncing, but he's giving you gifts.
I
Okay.
know, just trying to be like, oh, like I'll pay you back, or not, I'll pay you back. Like, just to try to like make me forget that he like owed me money. And I was like, well, I'm sorry, but like this Michael Kors watch or whatever crappy gift you're going to get me isn't going to pay my bills. Like, it's not going to pay my rent. Like, this is why I started a business, so that I could be paid for services rendered, not in like trinkets.
Right.
So he's like, okay, you know what? I'm like really sorry about this. How about this? How about like we just go on a trip and, we can get away from everything that's going on. He's like, I'll just put it on the credit card. And, cause I just like want to like, I'm sorry for putting you through all this BS basically. And I said, okay. And so he like immediately books these tickets, and 3 days later we're going to a place called St. Lucia, and I don't know, we can move forward from there, or I can kind of open up the floor to more questions up until that point.
No, go ahead. Keep going. I did read about what happened, but keep going.
Yeah. So we get down there and the first 3 days are like really fine. They're fun. And the third day comes along and, at this point he's actually encouraging me to drink. And I'm like, hey, this is kind of weird. Like he's like, oh, do you want to get some drugs? And I'm like, well, weird, but okay. Like I was like, sure, we're on vacation. It's fun. And then the third day comes around and I normally go down to the pool at that time. And he's like, oh, well, you're actually not going anywhere. Did you really think this was all just fun and games? And he said our friends are picking us up at 3 p.m. and that I was going to help him smuggle drugs back to Canada because he was in a lot of debt. Yeah. And he just completely changed. Like
Seriously?
It was so easy for him
oh
to
gosh.
It was so easy for him just to change like that. And I was kind of, I thought it was a joke. Like I was like, okay, nice try. And he's like, no, they're picking us up at 3. And so at that point I'm just like, okay, this is so weird. And I was like, whatever, I'm not gonna do this. Like, and I was angry and I was hurt, but then I kind of blamed myself because I ignored all the red flags, and substances help us do that. So, and then so we go to this house, and then there's people there, and I guess at this point I guess when he booked the tickets, he asked me for my passport, and he took a picture of my passport and sent it to these people in St. Lucia, and told them that I was going to be helping him cover a debt that he had incurred somehow.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay. So you went to this house at 3:00.
Yeah. Went to the house at 3:00, and it looked like an old motel or like a bed and breakfast kind of thing. And then we go inside, and then there's like a couple of people there. There's no dogs barking. There's no guns. Like it's not like as dramatic as you would think, but it's still obviously very dramatic. It's just like a lady there, and she's like, "Thanks so much for doing this. I'm going to take your measurements now." And so she took my measurements, like so that she could make me a proper set of like customized spandex underwear that would fit me, so that they could fit the appropriate amount of narcotics on me. So I was basically getting tailored to smuggle drugs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she did that. And then what happened next? How did that progress?
So we go back to the hotel. It's an all-inclusive. And at this point I'm like pissed because I was like, I'm not going to be good at this, and I was not a good actor. I'd never done this in my life. And I think because I'd traveled a lot prior to that, like I used to live in Indonesia, and I volunteered a lot kind of around the world. He saw this as like, oh, like she'll be a great person that like she'll never get looked at, right? Like I didn't have a record. Like I was basically some open-minded girl that had traveled a lot, that he could probably get drunk enough to just do it, right? And so I honestly was freaking out the last 3 days, and I was freaking out so much that he's like, okay, once we get to Pearson International, so the Toronto airport, you can take the drugs off and give them to me. Like just put them, I'll give you a backpack. So, supposedly I'm supposed to get off the plane with these drugs, put them in a backpack, and give him the backpack. So I'd kind of calmed down a little bit, like a little bit, but not a lot. And so I had a little bit of relief. And he didn't like want me on my phone or my computer or anything like that. And so it was 3 days of actual terror. It was not comfortable, obviously, at all, because I just wanted to go home and I didn't want to like put my family at risk any more than I already had. I didn't want to play hardball. This was not my world. So I figured I could just do the safest option, and that was to get home. And again, I was blaming myself the whole time because like I did ignore the red flags, and now it was on me. Like,
yeah, but now you're caught between a rock and a hard spot. I mean, what's your alternative? Go to the authorities in St. Lucia? I mean, I don't know what else you could have done at that point.
I don't know anyone else there, and the only person that I knew was him. So he was the only person I could really trust. And now that I have 2 kilograms of someone else's drugs on my body, I don't want to be the one responsible for sabotaging the loss of those drugs.
Right.
So, because that to me was the most dangerous thing. And so I just wanted to go home. I thought like, okay, what's, the worst that can happen is that I get over there and then I get caught and then I can just explain what happened. I didn't research the criminal code. I never thought that like 4 years later or not, like 2.5 years later, I'd be sitting in a prison cell, but that's the way that it went. And we get to Pearson, and I'm about to go to the bathroom to take these drugs off my body, because I knew for a fact I could not lie a customs officer I could not look a customs officer in the face and lie. I just couldn't. But he tells me, he's like, "Oh, sorry, it's too late now." He doesn't even give me a chance. So my loyalty to him ended there, but I knew that I still had to try my best to complete the task at hand.
So he's not going to give you the backpack. You don't get to take them off. It's on you. You have to get through customs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we go through the first security checkpoint. He's also given me no coaching as to who I was that day. Like, was I his girlfriend? How long had I known him? How did we meet? I didn't know. Like, what was I saying? Some concocted tale? Or was so basically I just had to make it up. And meanwhile, we're separated at the border. And so I'm like, he can't see me and I can't see him. So I just made everything up except for the truth about my name and what I did for work. Like, I was like, this is what I do. This is where I traveled last. This is how much I made. Right. Because I knew that they could look it up if they wanted to.
Right.
And then finally they asked me, so Miss O'Brien, we have to ask, because we're going to do a body search. Do you have drugs on you? And I stared at the floor for 10 seconds, and they had to ask me again. So I said yes, because I knew that lying to a federal agent, I knew that I was already caught. I knew that my body was like, you can lie with your words or try to lie with yours, but your body cannot lie through those kinds of situations. And I was also pissed. I was mad at him. So like I had to try to hide my anger for like that last minute bait and switch, while still at the same time trying to get, is just not going to happen. So I was like, I'm telling the truth. And I felt like that was just the right thing to do at that point.
You are listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return. For more information on the podcast, or to reach out if you have a story you would like to share with us, go to our Facebook page by the same name, or you can email us at theaddictionpodcast@yahoo.com, or go to our website, theaddictionpodcast.com, or call us at 727-314-7080. And please remember to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and give us a 5-star review. For more information on our sponsor, Narconon Ojai, visit their website at narcononojai.org. That's NARCONONOJAI.org. Or call 1-866-231-5924. That's 1-866-231-5924. Sometimes, the hardest thing about getting someone into recovery is getting them to agree to treatment. Bobby Newman, a certified drug counselor with 30 years experience and an over 85% success rate as an interventionist, has created a series of 12 videos that you can use right now to learn every step to get your loved one to agree to treatment. Call 1-833-918-0008 today and say the word podcast to get a 10% discount. Or go to newmaninterventions.com and type in the word podcast for a 10% discount. This service comes with a free 1-hour consultation with Bobby. And so you said, yes, I do have drugs on me. So what happened then?
So I get put into a holding cell, and I'm just trying to explain like what happened, again, I was very ignorant to the seriousness of the case, but, and, people have always been like, how could you not know? But it's like, you don't research that stuff when you don't plan it,
Right.
So it's like, how am I supposed to memorize like the punishment, like the crime and punishment for this kind of thing if I wasn't like planning it like at all? So
Emily, did they catch him or no?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you tell them who he was so they could, did you help in them getting him?
He was with me.
Oh, okay.
So he actually had drugs on him too.
Right.
But I wasn't about to go to trial and try to testify against anyone because I just wanted to plead guilty, and I wasn't going to essentially like be a tattletale. Like I just wanted to admit my like involvement and try to for the best case scenario, because I didn't want, again, that's all playing hardball, and that's not really what you do in that world. And luckily my lawyer found a way to separate our cases so that I didn't actually have to testify against him at all. And I pled guilty so early in the court process that it actually helped my sentencing, because I guess most people like will plead not guilty for so long, and then at the end, okay, wait, yeah. So I admitted my guilt very early.
And so your attorney, did you like have to go get a criminal attorney once this all happened at the airport? Once you were arrested, you had to go find a criminal attorney?
Yeah, my parents had to, because I couldn't leave at that point, like they had to call my parents. My parents were on vacation. They were 3 hours away. They had to, pick up and leave. And, I'm so grateful for that I have them, and that they wanted to do that for me. And so my father actually found a lawyer that he knew. And after I had a bail hearing, I was in jail for the whole weekend, and it was still all of like a blur, like, because I think it was like I was just in shock. I was like, okay, when can I go home? And again, ignorant, right? But I was not experienced.
Were you also high, Emily, or no at that point?
No, I was sober the day of the flight. Yeah, I was sober since that minute we left.
Okay.
Which I'm also glad that I was, because it helped my body tell the truth without me having to say a word. So.
Understood. Okay, so you went to trial, and then what was the sentence?
Well, I didn't actually go to trial. I just did a guilty plea.
Oh, okay. So you did like a plea bargain.
Yep. Because, if I went to trial, it would have been more expensive, harder on my family. And I knew that I had to take responsibility in one way or the next. Sure, maybe I didn't organize this whole debacle, but I knew that I had struggled with, substances, and I put that struggle aside, and I didn't prioritize my healing or what was really going on. And so taking ownership and accountability for that was my first step in actually healing and being able to move forward instead of back.
That's interesting. So that was kind of almost like the first, like, we could say your point of no return, getting arrested and realizing that you had to take responsibility. That's a big step. Well done on you.
Well, it didn't. Yeah, it wasn't right away. Like, I spent a lot of time being mad at first, for sure, and and just being like, because everyone, people that I told, like, there was a harm done to me, right? So I spent a lot of time living in that, like, I was harmed phase, and not like, oh, what could I have done differently phase, right? So, but I did. It takes a while to come around from these things, but when I just saw how it wasn't helping me, and I hate being mad. Like, I'm just not a mad person, and I hate living in a toxic mindset. And so I was like, okay, I need to get out of this somehow. And So I began to kind of think about what I could do with this situation instead of what it was doing to me.
That's fascinating. I mean, that's a really good shift of viewpoint. Do you know? Because I can see how maybe me being in the same position, I might be look at what this guy has done to me. But I think the point at which you go, wait a second, let's look at what responsibility I can take. I think that's huge. I mean, I think that's huge.
Mm-hmm.
So what sentence did you get, or what was the sentence? What was the jail time you were given?
I was given 4 years, a 4-year sentence. So, because we have mandatory minimums in Canada, I believe you have them in the United States as well. And when I first, in the beginning, I was like, oh my God, prison, no way. Like, I saw it as an inconvenience, right? I was like, I have a career, I have this. But then I started to see prison as maybe being like not a free rehab. Like, it definitely wasn't free because I paid my lawyer $50,000. So, but you have to look at all these costs. And I'm like, okay, if I'm going to pay $50,000 for a lawyer and I'm going to go to prison, this is my rehab fee. This is my time to recover. And so I just started to reframe every single thing that I was going to have to go through from that point on. It's like, okay, so you do have to go to prison. So you won't have a phone. Okay, that's good. No technology. Fine. I can create in different ways. I get to, no TV, or like, they're not your own TV, at least. Like, you can read, right? And I've always loved to read. So I got to reignite my favorite hobbies as a kid inside. And sure, there was a lot of things that I lost, but the most important things that I had never went anywhere. And I think that's what we fear sometimes when things are taken. It's like, well, we never really needed them. We just wanted them. So yeah.
You have a very positive outlook. And I think that has done you well. I mean, well done on having such a positive outlook, even looking at something like prison, which could, for a lot of people, I think, more cave them in and maybe move toward depression or the dark side, if you will. But you looked at it as something to take as an opportunity, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it took a long time to heal, for sure. Like, it's not something, and you have to apologize and you have to hold up your end of the bargain. Like, my family would not have kept forgiving me if I didn't hold up, the fact that I said I was going to stop. Right. So, I had to put in the work, and that took years. Right. And some days were not easy. Some days were really hard. I found it really hard to even like date anyone because I was like, oh my God, like, I didn't like trust anyone. And, I was getting rid of substances. So I needed to like be in my own body with myself for like quite a while. And luckily, being in prison, you don't get to have sleepovers there.
Right. So you got clean and sober in prison, right? Because you had to stop in prison.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I was like, the day that I go in, I was like, okay, this is it. This is it.
And what was it like in prison? What happened there?
So in the Canadian prison system, like, I knew that I was going to have to serve a sixth of my sentence as long as I didn't cause any trouble, and then I'd be eligible for day parole. So my time in there, I spent 11 months in there, and then I had to go live in a halfway house. So knowing the schedule, I really wanted to see like what I could accomplish. And I also wanted to listen to other people's stories and learn a little bit more, because once I did, I really realized how much privilege I had compared to a lot of people that are incarcerated. I had a family that could afford the $50,000 bail. I had a family that could like leave work and come visit me because the visiting hours are only 5 till 7 and the prison's like 2 hours away. Right. They would send me,
or even
like,
wanted
letters
to come visit you. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
exactly.
I would imagine there are some people in prison, nobody really wants to come and visit them.
Yeah. Like, depending on like your environment, there's like a lot of shame that goes like, sure, there's like universal shame, but I know like certain women that I talked to, they'd be like, if I told anyone about this, like, my family would disown me. Like, they've pretty much already disowned me. So I was blessed in a way that like my family was willing to let me share this part of my life as long as I did the right thing with it. Right. Like, they wanted some sort of social good to come out of that. And then it all started to come together in prison. So
what happened there? I mean, what came together there? Tell us about how you progressed from there to the business you have now.
Yeah. So when I got into prison, I really noticed how people were actually really kind. Like, the most people, like the majority of people you meet in there are people that have, gone through tremendous abuse in their lives. Like I was lucky again, I had never been sexually abused, and a lot of women in prison had, and or just subject to horrific violence or poverty. But every single person I met in there had good intentions to get out, and they wanted something better. So we often had like not parties, but like in Canadian federal prison, we get like a food budget. So it's not on trays or anything like that. You get $38.01 to spend on like a list of groceries. And so we would have certain spices, and then we also had the canteen list. So people would buy popcorn kernels at the canteen, or chips or whatever, and some people would make muffins, and some people would make like fried chicken, and have fried chicken for everyone. So food really brought people together. Like it was a way that people kind of found healing and joy and hope and creativity. And so one day someone put like we were popping popcorn, and someone put like lemon, pepper, and dill as a spice on it. And I particularly liked popcorn because I didn't mention this before, but I also struggled a lot with an eating disorder in high school. And so I kind of, I can't believe I left it out, but like I really struggled. And so I wanted to have a healthier snack because I was in a confined space and I didn't want those like habits to reemerge. And so I was like, oh, like lemon pepper and dill is actually good on popcorn and it's healthy. And then I began to think, I was like, what kind of like healthy popcorn companies are there? And maybe ones that can have a story to it. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm going to start a popcorn company so that I can actually employ people, because I also knew that reentry comes with a lot of anxiety because of the uncertainty in the job market or the hopelessness that one feels, whether because of the people that they are surrounded by or by, just employers that aren't willing to give them a chance. And
right.
So I was like, I want to be one of those people. Like I wanted to write a book, and then I was like, I want to do more than write a book. I wanted to create something that could like have a ripple effect and also help create employment, because I want to showcase the skills and the talent of the people that were in there with me, because at this point I believed in myself and I wanted others to believe in themselves too.
Wow. What a great goal. What a great kind of mission you set for yourself. So did you hire some of the people that you were in prison with when you got out?
Yeah, like I started with popcorn kernels and stamps. And so I would write letters to people. I read a lot of books, and then we had like a little website built. Like I found a business, my friend is now my business partner. And so he helped build like a temporary website. Like, so I could like check emails through the phone. We built our business plan through snail mail, and like we did our logo design through snail mail. He would send me like food market research. And then when I got out, I wasn't actually allowed to hire people that I was in prison with, because it's, there's one of these conditions when you're on parole is that you can't associate with anyone else that's on parole. So the people that I'm now allowed to hire, they have to be done their parole. So I'm fine with that, because I'm only on parole for one more year. And we have like a great team of, there's about 6 of us now. So
but you can
great.
Still hire people who are, they have to be done with their parole?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you can still hire people who have a record, if you will. And that was what your intention was.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Or people that just have had addiction in the past, because if you can work in an environment where you can talk about your addiction freely, I think it makes you feel safer, and you can actually trust the person you're working with. So instead of having a relationship where it's like boss and worker, it's more like this, because we've all been there.
Right.
Like we can talk about the worst times of our life. Like you can call me and say you're thinking about maybe using, or so, because there's like that safeness, whereas like a lot of workplaces aren't like that. It's like, you can't talk about this. It's like you can't be weak.
Well, and also because there's no reality. I mean, I've never been an addict, and I've never done drugs. So if you were working with me, I wouldn't necessarily be somebody you could talk to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have a lot of, you all have reality amongst yourselves. And I think that creates such a great synergy, for a company. I think that's great. So,
thank you.
So how's your company going? You changed the name, right?
Yeah, I did. Originally it was called Cons and Kernels.
I like that name.
I know. And I like it too, because it was like a collective decision among the inmates. Like I would kind of get everyone involved in this popcorn business, right? And so I was like, what should I call it? So I put out a survey. But as I got out and we started to going into different channels like e-commerce or schools or retail, I realized that cons and kernels kind of alienated us and where we could go. And so I was like, you know what, comeback snacks, like we've made a comeback. Maybe we started out as cons and kernels. But the best way to eradicate stigma is through proof. And it's the proof of the comeback. Like after almost 2 years in business, I can now say that, yes, you can hire from people. You can hire people that have a record, and no, they won't steal from you. Yes, they do want to show up for work. Yes, they can do math. They can calculate, like they can, they have drive, right? It's just sometimes, and ignorance is not bliss. And if we want to actually have a better society, right? So
it's actually very cool because, we talk a lot on the podcast about the stigma of addiction, but you're also helping to handle the stigma of having been in prison. There's such a stigma attached to it. And the things that you said, like, oh, this person's going to steal from me, this person's going to be dishonest. There's like a moral code, and the idea is, oh, because this person was in prison, they no longer have it. And that's not necessarily true. In fact, I think it probably in most cases, it is not true. They do have a moral code.
Yeah. And addiction is a form of a prison, right? So
I think
like
that
was a prison I was in before. And that's why when I went to this physical prison, I felt like I was freer than I ever was. Right. So.
Right. Well, that's awesome. So your business has been going for 2 years. If someone wanted to reach out, I don't know, maybe looking for a job or maybe looking for, do you go around and do you talk about what you're doing? Do you do public speaking about it?
Yeah. And I also work with employers to help them modify their HR policies.
That's awesome. We had a woman on the podcast before, Shelly Winter, and she does the same thing because when she was trying to get hired by a major software company, she ran into a lot of trouble and eventually worked her way through, and she was able to get hired. But now she goes around and talks to employers about, like the value of hiring people who have a lot of skill. They made a bad choice. They took a detour at one point. So if people wanted to reach you to get you to come and speak or just talk to you, how do they do that?
They can find me online, like on social media. My personal handle is on Instagram is ems.o'brien, or at comeback snacks. And then you can, if you want to send an email, you can go to our website, comebacksnacks.com. We're really, really friendly, very responsive. So, or on LinkedIn, Emily O'Brien. So anything.
Awesome. Emily, if you had just one message to give to the people who listen, whether they are addicts or families of addicts, what would that message be?
Never stop loving. Never stop loving yourself, and never stop loving the person that's going through a challenging time. Because what kept me going forward was the unconditional love that I really had. And yes, we went through a lot of painful times together, but because that love was still there, we made it out together, and now we're stronger than ever. So
great message. Nothing stronger than love. Emily, thank you so much for being willing to be on the podcast today and telling your story. I think it's a great story. And I know that there are people who are listening who, may end up in your position and may end up in prison. And, you got two choices. You can either have it be horrible, or you can figure out how to turn it around and make it worthwhile. And you definitely did that. And now you're helping other people, and that's huge.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Emily O'Brien. I think that it is a message about positivity. I think that so often when someone becomes an addict, and if you are a loved one of an addict, this is something you might want to understand. Most often, I think when people become addicts, they really have lost their self-respect in some way or another. And Emily managed to get that back in spite of the fact that she was in prison. She turned it into a positive experience, and she also had the love of a family to keep her going. And the love of the person who's addicted is something that you never want to lose. I'm not saying you want to enable them, and that's obviously not a good idea. But, I think with love and positivity that anybody can gain their self-respect back, and they can then move on. If she can go to prison and come out and be a successful entrepreneur, anybody listening can do that. Y'all can do that. We are a week out from Christmas. It is right before the holidays. If you or a loved one has an addiction problem, please, please, please reach out now. The holidays are not a pleasant time for someone who's addicted. If anything, I think it makes the guilt of addiction worse. And you may think, if you're the loved one, that it would just be nice to have the person around for the holidays. It's not going to be good. Trust me on that. Get them help. Get them help right now, today. Don't wait. And we will talk to you again. Thank you so much for listening.
You have been listening to the Addiction Podcast, Point of No Return, sponsored by Narconon Ojai. For more information on Narconon Ojai, call 866-231-5924 or visit www.narcononojai.org. Narconon is a non-12-step rehabilitation program based on the works of L. Ron Hubbard.